Have you ever wondered why someone who seemed so emotionally distant, maybe even cold, suddenly starts circling back after you've moved on? They weren't present when you needed them. They pulled away when things got close. And now, out of nowhere, they're liking your posts, watching your stories, sending a casual "how have you been?" It leaves you confused, maybe even a little hopeful. Why now? What made them remember you? Hey, I'm Jim Rohn, and in today's video I want to walk you through one of the most misunderstood dynamics in avoidant attachment, why avoidants secretly fixate on a specific kind of partner, and why that partner is rarely the one who chased or begged. If you've ever been the one trying harder, loving deeper, over-explaining your worth just to get crumbs of affection, I know how heavy that emotional labor feels. And I want to tell you something that might surprise you. That's not what avoidants hold on to. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Avoidants are not drawn to intensity or emotional overfunctioning. They become fixated on the partner who calmly chose themselves, the one who stopped trying to win them over, the one who walked away not with drama, but with quiet dignity. That energy stays with them, even if they don't show it, because avoidants crave emotional safety, but they often don't know how to build it. So when you stop giving and start protecting your peace, you disrupt their pattern in a way they don't forget. In this video, I'll help you understand what really goes on inside the avoidant mind. We'll talk about the psychology behind why they pull away, why they come back, and most importantly, why your detachment becomes the very thing they can't stop thinking about. So if you're tired of feeling like you were never enough, like your love was wasted, or like you were forgotten, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick with me. Because once you truly understand the kind of energy avoidants secretly fixate on, you'll stop chasing and start standing in the power of calm, clear self-worth. Let's clear up a common misunderstanding right off the bat. Avoidants are not emotionally numb. They're emotionally guarded. And there's a big difference. From the outside, it might look like they don't care. Maybe they seemed completely unaffected when you cried, pulled away when you got vulnerable, or acted like nothing happened when you walked out the door. But that's not because they lack emotion, it's because they don't feel safe expressing it. Avoidants grew up believing that closeness leads to pain, or that emotions are unsafe, overwhelming, or even shameful. So what did they learn to do? Shut down, build walls, create distance. They've mastered the art of staying just far enough away that they don't have to feel the discomfort that intimacy brings. But underneath that emotional armor, they do feel deeply. They just don't let it show. And here's the twist: they're not deeply impacted by the person who chases them. They're impacted by the person who stops chasing. That's why so many people get confused after a breakup with an avoidant. You gave everything. You showed patience, compassion, loyalty even when they pulled away. And yet they didn't respond. It's heartbreaking. But then weeks or months later, you start to notice them creeping back into your life. A like here, a random message there. It's confusing, because the person who seemed unaffected is now showing signs that they do remember you, and not just remember you, linger in their mind. Why? Because you walked away, not in anger, not in chaos, but with clarity. You stopped trying to convince them. You stopped overfunctioning. You chose yourself. And that's what broke through the emotional armor. That's the dynamic they obsess over. It disrupts their emotional blueprint. They expect emotional pursuit, not calm detachment. When you no longer feed their fear-based cycle, when you don't try to fix the disconnection, it forces them to confront something they've been avoiding all along: the weight of their own behavior. See, what really hits an avoidant isn't your tears. It's your peace. It's your silence. It's the absence of effort they once depended on. That shift shakes them because it breaks their illusion of control. It forces them to sit in what they've created. And for someone who's used to avoiding emotional consequences, that is unforgettable. So no, they're not numb, but they are guarded, and that guard stays up until you stop knocking. When you do, the impact sinks in deeper than you may ever see. And that's when the obsession begins, not with the one who clung, but with the one who calmly let go. It might sound paradoxical, but let's explore why detachment can be so incredibly attractive to someone who is avoidant. It may feel backward at first. You'd think the more love and reassurance you give, the more they'd feel safe and come closer. But with avoidance, it often works the opposite way. The more emotionally available and expressive you are, especially when it's not reciprocated, the more pressure they feel. And pressure, for an avoidant, equals threat. So they retreat, they shut down, and it leaves you feeling like your love was too much. But here's the twist: when you detach, everything changes. Not because you're trying to play games or punish them, but because you've reached your limit. You're no longer willing to abandon yourself just to hold the relationship together. And that kind of detachment, it's powerful. Not the kind where you silently suffer and wait for them to notice, but the real kind. The grounded kind. The kind where you're no longer emotionally available to dysfunction. Avoidants are used to having emotional control in relationships. They pull back, and the other person leans in. That dynamic feels familiar. It keeps them from having to face their own emotional limitations. But when you step out of that dance, when you stop chasing, stop pleading, and just let go, you create an emotional disruption they don't expect. Suddenly, they're no longer in control. They're no longer the one deciding when and how connection happens. Your absence interrupts their rhythm, and that disruption, it's what makes them notice. Take a real example. Dana spent a year with someone who ran every time things got real. She constantly tried to explain herself, understand his moods, and keep the peace. But one day she just stopped. She didn't make an announcement. She didn't send a final message. She simply detached. She started choosing her peace. And a month later, there he was, reaching out, curious, confused, testing the waters, because the emotional pull he once relied on was gone. That's what real detachment does. It shifts the emotional energy of the relationship. It says, I'm no longer available to be minimized, breadcrumbed, or ignored. And while it's not your job to get them to notice, many do. Because you've become something they don't often encounter, someone who holds their own ground. Avoidants don't consciously think, I want someone who walks away. But they are impacted by it. Because when you stop trying to prove your worth and instead embody it, that creates space for them to finally feel the loss. Not just the loss of you, but the loss of the emotional safety they never knew how to receive. So if you've detached not out of anger, but out of self-respect, know this: you're not being cold. You're being clear. And that clarity, that's what leaves an impression that lingers. Here's something most people don't expect. It's not neediness that keeps an avoidant thinking about you, it's your self-respect. The person who calmly enforces boundaries, who says no without raising their voice, who stops explaining themselves after they've been clear, that's the one the avoidant can't shake. Why? Because they're used to emotional overfunctioning. They expect people to chase, to plead, to keep trying after they've gone silent or withdrawn. That's the dynamic they know. But when you don't do that, when you hold your ground and walk away with quiet dignity, it disrupts everything. Avoidants aren't drawn to drama. In fact, emotional intensity often makes them retreat even further. What sticks with them isn't chaos, it's composure. They remember the person who didn't flinch when they pulled away. The one who didn't beg to be chosen. The one who said, I'm not going to keep reaching for someone who won't meet me halfway. That kind of strength, subtle, grounded, unwavering, is rare. And because avoidants struggle with their own internal sense of stability, they're impacted by anyone who models it. Take Olivia, for example. Her avoidant partner would always go cold when things got close. Instead of reacting like she used to, Olivia just said, I need a relationship that feels mutual. If you can't give that, I'm going to stop trying to create it alone. And then she stuck to it. No silent treatment, no guilt trip, just calm clarity. Months later, he was still reaching out, not because she punished him, but because she made a lasting emotional impression. Respect, especially self-respect, is magnetic. And when you stop chasing love and start standing in your worth, that's what an avoidant feels most deeply. Not your intensity, but your boundaries. Not your emotion, but your emotional stability. That's what makes them look back. Let's talk about one of the most powerful tools you have in a dynamic with an avoidant partner: your boundaries. Not walls, not emotional gains, real, calm, self-respecting boundaries. When you're in the anxious avoidance cycle, it's easy to fall into overfunctioning. You try harder. You over-explain. You wait longer than you should. All of this is done in hopes that the avoidant will finally open up, finally show up. But when you begin to hold boundaries not from anger but from clarity, everything shifts. Here's what happens. The avoidant, who's used to controlling the emotional pace, is suddenly met with your silence. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that says, I won't keep overextending for someone who can't meet me. And that silence, it's deafening, louder than any confrontation or emotional plea, because they don't know what to do with it. They're used to noise, to emotional pursuit, to someone trying to fix the disconnection. But now, there's space, stillness, and they have to sit in it. Take someone like Maya. She used to text after every argument, trying to repair things. But one day she didn't. She stopped explaining. She stopped chasing. She simply said, this isn't working for me anymore. and let the silence speak for itself. Her avoidant partner didn't know how to handle it. The stillness made him uncomfortable because for the first time there was no emotional buffer. He had to sit with his own choices, and that's what made him reflect. Boundaries have a way of holding up a mirror. When you stop cushioning their behavior, they have to face themselves. They're left with the consequences of the space they created, and for many avoidants, that's where the real impact lands. Not in the moments you try to save the relationship, but in the moment you stop trying altogether. That's what stays with them. That's what sticks. One of the most transformative moments in the avoidant-anxious dynamic is when you stop being the chaser and become the challenge. Now, I don't mean playing hard to get or using manipulation to get their attention. What I'm talking about is the natural shift that happens when you step fully into your self-respect and stop over-functioning in the relationship. It's the moment when your energy changes not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've finally had enough of proving everything. Avoidants are often used to leading the emotional dance. They push away, and you reach for them. They go silent, and you fill the space. That pattern becomes predictable even if it's painful. But when you break it, when you no longer react to every withdrawal, when you stop rescuing the connection, that's when the dynamic flips. Suddenly, the avoidant is no longer the one setting the pace. You are. And that shift in energy changes everything. When you stop chasing, the avoidant loses the emotional control they're used to. They can no longer count on your effort to keep the relationship afloat. And it's not about revenge or turning the tables. It's about you choosing to stop abandoning yourself. That grounded detachment creates something incredibly powerful, healthy resistance. Not emotional walls, but emotional standards. You're no longer begging to be seen. You're standing still and letting the avoidant notice the absence of the energy they used to take for granted. Let's look at a real example. Marcus had always been the pursuer in his relationship with Ella. She'd pull away when things got close, and he'd double down, calling more, apologizing for things that weren't his fault, trying to keep the peace. But one day Marcus stopped. He didn't make a dramatic exit. He simply said, "I care about you, but I won't keep chasing someone who doesn't meet me halfway." And he meant it. He started focusing on his own healing, his own boundaries, and Ella felt it. For the first time, she didn't have control over the pace of the relationship. And that space, it made her think. When you stop chasing, the avoidant is left with a new kind of experience, one where they have to self-reflect, not just react. Your absence becomes a mirror. They have to look at what they've avoided. And whether they act on it or not, they remember it. Because the partner who stands in their worth without trying to be chosen is not easily forgotten. So if you're in that place, tired of reaching, tired of feeling like it's always on you, try shifting your energy back to yourself. Not to create distance, but to create balance. Because once you stop chasing, you stop handing them the script. And for the first time, they have to choose whether to show up differently or watch you walk away for real. Either way, you've already won. Because you've chosen you. Avoidants don't become obsessed with the person who was always there, always available, always trying. That person, while deeply loving and loyal, fits too neatly into their pattern, someone who gives while they retreat. But the one they can't stop thinking about, the one who stays on their mind long after the relationship ends, it's the partner who walked away with self-trust. The person who didn't scream, didn't beg, and didn't try to convince them to stay, but instead left quietly, respectfully, and with clarity. That's the person who leaves a lasting emotional imprint. Obsession doesn't grow in closeness for avoidance. It grows in the void. It grows when your energy, which they took for granted, is no longer there. When you stop showing up, when your emotional availability disappears, not out of punishment, but because you chose your peace, they feel the absence. And that absence creates space for reflection. It forces them to sit with the consequences of their behavior, sometimes for the very first time. Take Jordan, for example. His partner Mia was patient through months of mixed signals and distance. But eventually she stopped engaging. No long explanations, no goodbye monologue. Just a message that said, "This isn't what I want for myself anymore." Then silence. Weeks passed. Jordan didn't expect to miss her. He thought she'd come back like before. But she didn't. And that's when the obsession began. Not because Mia tried to make him chase her, but because she didn't. She chose herself, and he felt the weight of that choice more than he ever expected. That's the power of real detachment. When you stop trying to be chosen and start trusting that you're already enough, your absence becomes louder than any words. And that silence, that's what they carry with them. That's what they remember. Let's bring everything together with the clarity and self-respect you've been growing into. Throughout this video, we've uncovered a truth that many people miss in the anxious-avoidant dynamic. You don't become unforgettable by giving more, you become unforgettable by knowing when to stop giving. Avoidants don't fixate on the person who pleaded, chased, or tried harder. They fixate on the person who walked away with grace. The one who stopped over-functioning. The one who quietly chose themselves not out of spite, but from self-respect. We explored why avoidants aren't numb, they're guarded. We looked at how true detachment not games, but genuine emotional withdrawal disrupts their control and forces reflection. We talked about the power of calm boundaries, how healthy resistance shifts the dynamic, and why obsession often begins after you leave. Not because you were unavailable, but because your self-worth no longer depended on being chosen by someone who couldn't meet you. If there's one message I want to leave you with, it's this: your worth was never tied to how hard you tried to hold it together. It was never about being needed. It was always about being true to yourself. You are allowed to leave when love is no longer mutual. You are allowed to stop pouring into someone who doesn't pour back. And you are allowed to be unforgettable, not because you chased, but because you didn't have to. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If this message resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. What part of this video hit home for you? And what shift are you ready to make in your own healing? Your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and your healing, it's already in motion. Remember, the person who calmly walks away when the relationship becomes one-sided, that's the person who is remembered. Not for how loudly they fought to be loved, but for how silently they loved themselves enough to let go.